Today we're looking at how to make graphs on Google Sheets. I think Excel is a much better program, but it's not always available, and collaboration isn't as easy in a school setting. Also, Chromebooks are Google Drive centric, so in an environment with a lot of Chromebooks, it makes sense to use Sheets. A lot of what we're looking at in this video may be review for some students, but I don't want to assume any previous knowledge. If you already feel confident about anything being discussed, you can skip ahead or turn up the playback speed. The key with any graphing software is you need to know what you want your results to be. You don't want to count on the program to correctly predict what type of graph you want to make. For example, here are two data entry methods with the same data. This first one has time listed once, and then the measurements for each of two samples. For the second data set, there is a column identifying the independent variable, which is time, the dependent variable, whatever we're measuring here, and then identifying the samples. If we make a chart for this first one, we get approximately what we want for this visualization. We have a comparison of the two different samples. If we make a chart for the second one, though, the predicted chart looks very different from what we want. This is why it's really important to already know what you want from your graph before you hit the Insert Graph button, so that you don't just accept the graph that it gives you if it's inappropriate for your data. We'll come back to this later and look at how we can tell the program what we want from this graph. Before we get to how to make a graph on Sheets, let's first look at some graphing expectations. For my classes, you generally are going to want your independent variable on the x-axis and the dependent variable on the y-axis. If you're not sure what type of graph to make, a general rule of thumb is to use a scatter plot when you have numeric data on your x-axis and a bar graph when you have categories on your x-axis. There's certainly exceptions to this, but it's a good starting place, especially if you're relatively new to having to decide what type of graph to make. Next, we'll look at how to make a couple basic graphs on Sheets. First up is a scatter plot. We've got some generic data entered here. In terms of data entry, keep in mind that everything is contained within these cells. So even though you can't see the whole word variable here, it is contained within that cell, and you can see that up here. It'll show you the entirety of whatever's entered in the cell. A common mistake I see students make is when the text or data spills outside of the cell, like it does here in dependent variable, they will leave the cell next to it empty before entering anything into a new column. So for example, if we wanted to add a third column to this, we would want to start it in column C. But sometimes I see students start it in column D. So then when you go to graph this, so say we've got some sort of data here, and you try to graph this, you end up including these empty cells in the middle. And so Sheets will then be trying to add this nothingness to the graph, which isn't what you want. So you can go ahead and add that. You don't need to be able to see the whole term there to enter something in the next cell. If you want to clean up the look of your data, which is important if you want to be able to share it, you can always change the size of the columns. Back to making the graph. Click and drag to select the data. Then you can either click Insert and select the chart option, or you can come over here to the Insert Chart button and click on that. Sheets really likes the line graphs, but for my classes, we're typically going to want to change this to a scatter plot. All edits to the chart can be made in the chart editor. This will open automatically when you make the chart. But if for any reason you close it and then need to get back to it, you can click on the chart and then click on the three dots and click Edit Chart, and that will bring the chart editor back up. The Setup tab is where you can change the chart type or adjust the data. So for chart type here, we're going to change it to a scatter chart. And for now, we don't have to do anything to adjust the data. We will come back to that later to look at an example of how to make adjustments there. Under Customize, you can make a lot of adjustments. Clicking on any part of the graph will open that part of the customization editor. From here, you can change the title, any of the labels. We could add our units there. We could adjust the scale if we needed to. If I click on one of the data points, it will bring up what's called the series, and this will allow me to make changes to the color, size, shape, whatever I want to with the data points. This is potentially more important when you have multiple data series that you need to differentiate between. Now, most of these are just cosmetic changes, but there is a really important option in the series customization, and that is adding a trend line. You don't want to add a trend line on every chart, but on many scatter plots, they're super useful. To add a trend line, I'm going to come down to the end of the series editor and just click the box for trend line. Then under the label option, I'm going to select Use Equation, and that will add the equation for the trend line up here in your key. So this is giving me the line equation in terms of y equals mx plus b, and this can be used for inferring or extrapolating data points, and it also gives us rate because rate equals the slope. And we use this frequently in biology classes, so it's important to be able to get that information. The second graph we're going to look at is a bar graph, which in this context gets called a column chart. Again, we'll select and highlight our data and then click on the Insert Chart button. And this chart that we have here is fine, but visually I want columns in this case, so I'm going to come up to the chart type and select column chart. So we can also come over to the Customize tab to change how it looks, or we can add to the labels. Just like the last one, we can change the color, anything you want to do to change the appearance of this graph can happen in the Customize area of the chart editor. Next, we're going to go back to that chart that we made earlier where the graph didn't match our intended output. And just clean up this page a little bit, get rid of the stuff we don't need. First, we know we want a scatter plot, so I'm going to go ahead and change that. Now it looks better. This is much closer to what I want. I've actually got time correctly placed on the x-axis. However, I only have one data series for both samples A and B. So to fix this, I'm going to directly enter what I want for each data series. First, I'm going to change my x-axis. So I'm just going to add a new one here. Click on this box to select the data range, and I'm just going to select 0 to 5, since that'll be the same for both sets of data. Now notice here this now has 2 through 5. So I'm going to come down here and check this. It has use row 1 as headers. I'm going to get rid of that, and that helps my x-axis. So then for the series, again, I'm just going to take this off and start over. So I'm going to select, first of all, my A data. So just selecting that, hit OK. And now this looks reasonable for what I want for my sample A data. And then I'm going to add a series. Again, select the range I want. And then that adds in my sample B data. So now I have two separate data series. They're each in a different color for easy identification. I don't have a label right now on my x-axis. And come to chart and axis titles. And I want to change the horizontal axis title, and then whatever units I'm using. So now I have a graph that is reasonably representing my data. The big thing to keep in mind here is that it's okay to just start clicking around and try to figure out how to get your graph to look the way you want it to. You can always undo any changes, so don't worry about making things worse. Last, you can save or copy and paste any of your charts and graphs into other applications, such as documents or presentations. So if you come back to the chart, for example, click on the three dots, it gives you the option to download and save it as a PDF or an image. You can also just copy and paste that. So that's it, a general intro to a couple different types of graphs. Remember, there's a lot of other things you can do with your data in Sheets. This is just a very basic introduction.